Hey, hi all. In this session, we are going to talk about AngularJS Scope. So far we have seen different concepts in AngularJS, and in this today's session, we'll talk what is a scope and how we are passing a scope object between a controller and a module inside of AngularJS. So the scope is nothing but binding object between HTML and JavaScript. So HTML is nothing but UI layer where presenting the UI, and when it comes to JavaScript, it is kind of a business implementation. We are going to have it to generate data and bind the data to UI. So this AngularJS scope object is available for properties and methods inside of AngularJS scripts. So we generally pass scope parameter or argument for the controller while we create AngularJS controller. So let's see some of the definitions and the use cases of AngularJS scope. And then we'll see like the demonstration part of how we are going to pass argument of the scope while we're creating a controller, and then how we are going to use this as part of binding the data to HTML. Okay, let me get into Visual Studio Coder and see like how it is going to work. Before getting into the Visual Studio Coder, I just wanted to define some definition for to AngularJS scope here. So AngularJS scope is an object. AngularJS scope is an object, which basically AngularJS scope is an object, which basically use it for binding data between HTML and JavaScript. It is a, the binding part. It is a binding part between view and controller. Scope is a object with available properties and methods. So it is an object with the available properties and methods. The scope is available for both view and the controllers as mentioned above. And when you make a controller, when you make or create a controller using AngularJS, we will pass the scope object as an argument. Okay. So for example, like when you say example, I'm creating app equal to angular dot model, which I'm going to create it, right? And after this, my app dot controller of, this is controller name. And then here, I'm going to pass scope as an argument. So inside of this scope, right, I can write my JavaScript stuff to bind, right, data to the UI. So using that scope, I'm going to display the content onto the HTML part. Okay. So let me get into this Visual Studio Coder and see how I'm going to use different scope variables as part of data display on UI. Okay. So I'm just opening my Visual Studio Coder. I'm just creating for Angular scope.html. This is my file, and this is my default script which I need to have in all files because this is doc type and HTML, and this is right, AngularJS scope demo, and this is the reference which basically I'm giving the complete CDN path. So and after this, as usual, I'm going to close my head tag, and then I'm going to start my body tag. Instead of that, I'm going to start my form tag. Okay. And after form tag, I'm going to have my HTML controls form. Okay, let me remove this. So now what I'll do is I'll just come here. First, I'll write down my controller and module creation using AngularJS. My app equal to Angular dot model. Okay, of this is my app. This is my model name. Okay, and after this, I'm going to create controller using my variable here as my app dot controller of, and here I'm saying some controller name, controller one, and I'm going to pass scope as an argument because I'm going to use scope here. Similarly, I'll create one more controller of controller 2 function of dollar scope like this. So I have created two controllers. So let me rename this as a shape controller then. For shape for no sake of meaningful information. And this is shape controller, and this is uh, some square controller. Okay, square controller. So into this, I'm going to assign some variable str message equal to from shape control, from shape controller. Okay, I'm going to define one more variable called type equal to shape. Okay, similar variables I'm going to define it for this particular controller called square. So str message equal to from square controller, scope dot type equal to square. Okay, and coming to this form tag, instead of form tag I'm going to have div, and my ng app is, this is my app, model name is, right, and ng controller, that is, here I'm going to take first controller, that is shape controller. Okay, and I'm going to have a paragraph, this controller, and in this I'm going to use AngularJS expression with double curly braces. Inside that I'm just saying str message, so that from this controller, whatever message I'm going to have it here, that message I'm going to print. Okay, and similarly I'm going to have inside of this, I'm going to have one more div, and for this I'm going to give this div is closing, right? This is my first controller, and this is second controller. I'm going to say square controller. Same thing I'm going to use, this is str message. Okay, so with this paragraph, right, I'm going to use break, so that I'll be having break tag, br tag, right, and after that I'm going to print type. So we'll be having type variable also here. I'm just going to print this as well. When I run this, let me open within live server, and I can see this is from shape controller, this is from square controller. The type is shape, the type is square. So you can change it and you can see how it is rendering and showing on here. Okay, so the updated values will get affected here because you're getting through a relevant controller, and inside of that controller these are the variables, right? When you're using this controller, these variables comes and show you the relevant messages. When this controller has been mentioned here, the relevant messages and type will get displayed based on this controller. This way you are going to have n number of controllers. Like this, you may have n number of controllers, like circle controller. Okay, and then you pass the scope, and here you can assign the message is from circle controller, right? Scope dot type equal to circle. And similarly, you will have this, repeat this, and say this is square circle, and just pass the message and type. Oops. This is circle controller. Okay. And then message and the type. When I open it, I'll get to know like this is coming from shape and this is coming from square, this is coming from a circle. Okay. So this way you will be having a different scope variables, and along with that, you will define n number of parameters, properties or methods, and you will call only those parameters as part of the scope, and the controller it is going to fetch those values dynamically and display. Okay, so this is all about the scope variable defining as part of function creating in the controller, and using that scope variable you will be defining the variables, and those values will get displayed when you use just a controller name. Okay, so I hope you understood the scope variable creation here and the purpose of scope variable you're passing. And this way you can create n number of controllers, and all controllers are going to have its individual scope variable, and that scope object basically I can say it's an object, so you can define properties and methods. So those properties and methods you can invoke along with your controller so that the controller related properties and methods will get affected and displayed on the UI. So that's why I said the object which basically use it for binding a data between HTML and JavaScript. This is a binding part between view. Here view means HTML, and controller. Controller means JavaScript. Okay. So scope is a special JavaScript object that connects controller with views. Scope contains model data in controllers, right? So in the controllers, model data is accessible via scope object. Okay. So I can say scope is passed as first argument to controller during its construction or constructor definition. Okay, the scope.str messages which are defined in the example are the models which are used in the HTML page. So whatever you are defining here, like scope.str message equal to, right, some data, scope dot type equal to some data. So this scope.str message and type are the models which are used in the HTML page. So we assign values to models that are reflected the application model whose controller is so and so controller. We assign values to models that are reflected in the application module whose controller is here student controller. Okay, so we can define function in $scope this way. Okay, so I hope you understood what is Angular scope and how we are going to use it in AngularJS. Thanks for listening to this video and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.